All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Mark of Balance. My name is Mark. Hope you guys are all doing okay and recovering from the shared traumatic experience we all had together. And that experience was, of course, Andor Season 2, Episodes 7 through 9. We finally see the Ghorman Massacre, all the build-up, all the setup, all the world building pays off here, and we get a horrific display of Imperial aggression and evil in its purest form. And we end the arc with Mon Mothma's epic speech against Emperor Palpatine to the entire Imperial Senate. I love how they worked this in while also respecting the speech she gave in Star Wars Rebels. They didn't contradict canon. They did a very clever thing, which I'll get into a bit more when I talk about the specific details of these episodes. As you all know, Mon is my queen, and I love that she got her shining moment here. This is really what we've been building up to with her character for so long. Bix and Cassian have a very interesting encounter with a Force user, something I wasn't expecting in this show, and we end the arc with a bittersweet goodbye from Bix, who knows that if she stays around, Cassian will never be able to fully focus on the rebellion, and that would be a detriment to the galaxy as a whole, because she wants them to win so bad enough to sacrifice the best thing she has in her life. We also lose another main character in Cyril Karn, a character that I never knew I needed in Star Wars until this show. And seeing the Gorman Massacre through his eyes was a really interesting and genius way to not only make us feel the weight of the massacre we're obviously witnessing, but also the trauma that Cyril is now witnessing, because he feels that he is a part of this. He caused this, and it was never his intention. He was played by the ISB, and his devotion to the Empire comes crumbling down because he realizes he was serving a corrupt government. This arc isn't without its flaws, though, and I know that may be a hot take. I don't know what the general reaction is online. I'm sure a lot of people are loving this, but there are some aspects of this arc and of this season in general that haven't exactly landed for me, and I think this was something I was worried about coming into this season, and it was the time skips between the 3-episode arcs. I had a feeling that it would make the season a bit more disjointed than Season 1 for obvious reasons, but I also knew that there was going to be a lot of stuff that they would have to cram into these episodes, not just moving the story forward, but also establishing where the characters are during this time period and explaining what has happened over the past year or so. And in some cases, those characters don't get the proper development they needed. The biggest one for me in this arc was Deidre, who I think does a 180, and I don't think they conveyed her internal struggle enough beforehand where she wouldn't agree with something like the Gorman Massacre, because again, it was her idea in the first place to set the Gormans up for this, and we've seen her do terrible things in the name of the Empire, like torturing Bix. So I feel like there's somewhat of a disconnect between the Deidre we see in this arc and the Deidre we saw in the previous arc, especially her connection to Cyril, which I took as a more dominant relationship where she called the shots and she was using him like a tool and didn't really care about him. And in this arc, she seems to show care for him. It might be fear. I don't know. I'm going to get into it. But overall, I think Deidre was not handled as well as she should have been for a character that has been so important to the series. I also, again, think there's an awkward ending to this arc where we have this emotional moment with Bix, and then it kind of shifts directly into introducing K2SO again, and I think it undercut the moment a bit, and I think this is, again, a product of having to condense these very large storylines into these compact arcs, something they didn't have to do last season, but unfortunately they had to do for this season. But overall, I really enjoyed these episodes for obvious reasons. There was so much weight and emotion and the payoff to all the setup that has been put into the beginning of this season. I think I might like episode 9 more than episode 8, which is shocking to say, but I do think I enjoyed the very season 1 political thriller vibe of episode 9 with Mon and Luthen having these backdoor dealings again, getting Mon out of the Senate chamber, and the status quo shakeup of seeing Cassian and Mon on the screen together, even though they've been in the same show for 2 seasons now. We hadn't seen them on screen together yet. And you felt like there was a real shift in the galaxy finally. So I think I enjoyed episode 9 more than episode 8, but episode 8 was definitely a spectacle and definitely made me feel dirty watching it. Last thing I want to discuss for my overall thoughts is the music and the score from this arc. I was incorrect last week when I said that Nicholas Britell did not score anything in season 2. He was credited on scoring some pieces in the second volume of the score for episodes 4 through 6. I don't know if he has any hand in episodes 7 through 9, but again, I feel like the score has been less of a character than it was in season 1. I'm not saying it's not good. There's definitely some motifs that carry over. During Mon's speech, we hear the eulogy score from season 1 where Marva gave her speech, and I love that score, and I think it's a great moment to use that score. But I feel like the original scores haven't come through as much this season, and I feel like a lot of moments in this arc could have benefited from a singular vision like Nicholas Britell had in the first season. Again, nothing's bad about the score, it's just not as strong as it was in the first season. Jumping into the first episode from this arc, we have even more set up before the bomb goes off in the next episode with the Ghorman Massacre. Cyril starts to piece together that he is not privy to the larger picture of what he's been doing on Gorman. He thought he was there to bring outside agitators to light. He was going to get in with the Gorman resistance, and hopefully that would connect to the broader rebellion. But he realizes that the broader rebellion isn't involved, and this is just the Gorman people standing up for themselves because they are being lied to, they are being oppressed, and their world is about to be taken over and destroyed without their knowledge. So it goes directly against Cyril's code of honor, where even though in the first season he was painted as the antagonist, he's always put law and order and justice first in his life. And what Cassian did in the first episode of season 1 was murder. Like, he did kill those 2 corporate employees, and Cyril wanted to rightly bring him to justice. And in Cyril's eyes, he thought that the Empire and the ISB was the highest form of justice in the galaxy. He thought they were the good guys. He thought they were the ones that were bringing order to an unruly galaxy. And what he realizes here is that they're doing the opposite. They are not bringing order. They're bringing destruction. They're bringing chaos into the galaxy for their own good. And I think there were some hints of this turn earlier in the arc when he had the conversation with the leader of the resistance movement, and they started telling him about their plight and what happened. And you could see there was some emotion in Cyril's eyes that he started to question, are these really the bad guys? He continued to move forward with the plan because of Deidre. He was indebted to her. He was a tool for her. And he still thought he was doing the right thing because at that moment he was still new. He thought that the rebels were involved in a deeper sense, but they weren't. It was just the Gorman people standing up for themselves. Justly standing up for themselves. And when he does confront Deidre, it's a great moment for Cyril. He's like, what the hell are we doing here? We didn't do anything. Why are we getting rewarded? And where I have an issue, as I mentioned, is Deidre's character. She's a bit confusing, and it's not very clear where she had this flip of not understanding the broader picture of what's going on with Gorman. I appreciate the politics between the Imperial groups on the inside. The ISB and Partagaz are talking about, we want to be aligned with the Emperor, we want to do good work, and we want to fulfill these missions so that we are higher on the totem pole within the Imperial hierarchy. I think that's an interesting idea, but I don't think they made it clear that Deidre thought this was too far. She kind of jumps into this arc and she's already like, why are we using force? Why are we about to kill innocent people? She's very uncomfortable with this moral dilemma that we hadn't seen her ever have a moral issue with doing terrible things in the name of the Empire. And I wish there was just a scene that maybe in the last arc she is hesitant to go forward with something like this. I guess you can look back at that scene with her and Krennic where she's looking out the window and she doesn't want to participate in the meeting. And when Krennic comes up to her and asks, what do you think? She gives an answer because she felt threatened and she had to give an answer. And she knew it was the right answer. She's like, well, you should make them lash out and then you could bring down an iron fist on the Gorman people. That's the best way to subjugate them. But she didn't really want to be involved in that. She just wanted to catch Luthen and Axis and bring the rebels to light. And she might think that this was an unnecessary venture. Again, Deidre is similar to Cyril, where she puts law and order above everything. Her parents were criminals. She was abandoned by her parents. She respects law and order to the highest degree. I just think Cyril's shift was more subtle and it made more sense, and I think hers was very abrupt here. That's not saying her performance over these 3 episodes wasn't great. I love the scene where she's trying to take the ISB uniform off to agree. She feels choked. She feels suffocated by it. It was great use of imagery. I thought that was really interesting. I just wish we got there a little bit cleaner. Now, the most interesting scene from episode 7 is the Force healer at the Yavin Rebel base, where Cassian is recovering from a blaster wound on his shoulder. It's not healing, and Bix is shown to have a spiritual side in this arc more than I think we've seen in previous arcs, where she's like, I know a healer, we can go to them. Cassian makes this funny remark, like, it's all mumbo jumbo. Marva never believed in him. And so Bix brings him along anyway, and the healer senses him. And us as an audience are like, oh, wait, she actually does have the Force. This isn't like a scam. You're kind of on Cassian's side. Is this person a poser, or is she actually Force sensitive? And she notices Cassian through the Force. She walks up to him. She puts her hand on him. And this was such a tender and beautiful moment. Again, Tony Gilroy and the Andor writers have respected the Force, the Star Wars canon, and the ethos of Star Wars so much more than what we've seen from other Star Wars creators under Disney. And it's just incredible how simple it is, you know? We have this great scene where she's talking about Cassian being a messenger, and that Cassian is the first person in a long time to give her clarity. She knows to a degree that he will bring peace to the galaxy in his own way. And I like that this Force healer is very ambiguous. We don't know if she was a Jedi at one point. She's old enough to have been a Jedi, but you would think it would be a little bit more of a big deal if there was a Jedi at the camp or a surviving Jedi. So we don't know if she was a Force user that kind of wandered around and never fully went to the Jedi Temple, or if she was and she's done a great job of hiding her identity. I think this was just like a beautiful scene, and then she has that moment where Bix and her have a heart-to-heart, and she says, maybe you're the place that Cassian needs to be, which is a really sweet and heartfelt line that I'm still trying to decipher, because obviously this line continues to weigh on Bix over the next couple episodes where Cassian's off on Gorman. She has a lot of time to think, and she ultimately, as I mentioned before, decides to leave in favor of Cassian staying with the rebellion, because she knows that Cassian will pick her over the rebellion 9-10 times out of 10. So my initial reaction to the line was, oh, they need to stay together, but maybe she took it as she is a hindrance to the message or the purpose that Cassian has to fulfill. It's interesting. I still want to think about it some more, but let me know your thoughts. And so Cassian's shoulder feels better, and obviously this message gets to him, and he decides to follow Luthen's orders and go to Gorman to take out Deidre. And that's pretty much the first episode. Again, it's more setup. It's the 4th episode in a row of setup, which I think will turn off some people, but I think it's good overall. And again, I really enjoyed this inclusion of the Force and the more spiritual elements of Star Wars making their way into Andor. And of course, episode 8 is the Ghorman Massacre. We finally get to see it. It's been alluded to. This is the big moment that we've all been waiting for in season 2. And the buildup and the tension, as always, from Tony Gilroy and the Andor writing crew is fantastic. You know, they really stretch it out here. We see the Gormans slowly start to build in mass, and they start chanting as they all move towards the plaza. We see the Empire has brought in new recruits who are basically cannon fodder to get murdered to incite the riot, to make it seem like the Gormans were the ones who fired the first shot. Again, another layer to this, another layer to fascism and how they utilize the younger generation. While this is all going on, Cassian is trying to get a clear shot on Deidre. So again, Andor does a great job of building tension in so many different aspects of a scene and not just focusing on one. My favorite part of this entire buildup was when they started singing that Gorman song, and it's haunting, it's beautiful, and I just absolutely loved it. There was a heavy emphasis on these first 2 episodes with this score that's an angelic type choir that's a bit different for Star Wars when it comes to the musical soundscape, but I think it worked here, especially in conjunction with the song that they're singing here. It has a funeral type vibe, and I'm excited to listen back to it when it releases on streaming. Before things pop off, Cyril does go to Dedra and finally puts his foot down. He finally stands up to the women in his life. His mother was always talking down to him, and Dedra was using him, and he goes pretty hard on her. He pretty much chokes her out. He's so angry. He's so passionate about truth and justice that he was just ready to strangle his girlfriend over being lied to and over being a cog in this terrible machine. And again, props to both actors for Cyril and Dedra. They were fantastic in this scene. You can tell they're both just in a broken state here. She is horrified, which we never see her be scared, and Cyril is as serious and focused as he's ever been. And then, of course, the first shot is fired, and I wasn't expecting it to go the way it did, with the Imperials shooting their own people to incite the riot. It just, again, is a gut punch, and it drives home this point that there's no winners in this galaxy. Even the people who work for the Imperials, who are a part of the Empire, are disposable. They're all part of this terrible mechanism that only serves to benefit a very few amount of people. And when you see the young recruit turn his gun on a random person in the crowd and just fire and kill them, there's no music. It's just the sounds of blaster fire, people screaming, chaos. It's really visceral. It's really sad. It makes me feel dirty, watching it. And Cyril, again, is a great POV for this because his world is literally collapsing around him, not just people being shot around him, but also that he caused this to a degree. And you see him wanting to go to the resistance fighters who he was working with and spying on and warn them, but it just doesn't work. It's too late. It's too late. The dam is broken and the flood is coming. And one by one, our freedom fighters are killed. Cassian is caught up in the chaos, and surprisingly, he comes face to face with Cyril, who at this point is just raging because he's so mad at everything going on around him. And then he sees the literal person who set him on this path and ruined his life in the first place. And he gets some good punches in. I mean, Cyril puts up a solid fight, and he does kind of win. He has the jump on Cassian, and he is starting to lower the weapon when he has it over Cassian, and Cassian's like, "Who are you?" And I'm still mulling over this moment. Is he in this moment mad that Cassian hasn't even given him a second thought since they last saw each other, or that Cassian has no idea the impact that he's had on Cyril's life? Or is Cyril kind of thinking, what's the point of this, But we don't get to know because he gets shot by the leader of the resistance movement, and there goes Cyril. I mean, RIP again to a character that I did not think I needed in the Star Wars galaxy, but I thought he was a great addition here, a really tragic tale of someone wanting to do the right thing and how in a certain system you might become a part of the problem, even in the pursuit of good. And then the most brutal part of this whole thing is they release the K2 units, or I don't know if they're KX units or if they're called K2 units, I forget. But the Enforcer droids come out and they literally just start bludgeoning people in the streets. It's horrifying. One of them gets damaged, and Cassian thinks they would be useful for the rebellion, so he takes them, and that's how we eventually get K2SO in the next arc. And what I love about the ending of this episode is the silence. You see the TIE fighters flying above, and this massacre happens, and it's not this glorified. In glorified, I mean, like, the music isn't, like, super somber. It isn't trying to make it super artsy. It's just silence. It's just emptiness. This terrible thing just happened, and the universe goes on, and it's not like a moment where we all sit in it. I thought that was a really cool idea. And of course, the broadcast, the horrifying broadcast of this woman, the woman who Will is sleeping with and who is in love with. She's like, "Please, someone help us. We are being massacred on Gorman for no reason. We can't fight back. We've done nothing." And that's falling on deaf ears to a degree that they know no one's really going to come and stop the Empire, but it is inspiring people in the rebellion in a different way. And we get Cassian teary-eyed looking at the camera as the episode ends. We always end an episode with season 2 with Cassian crying directly into the camera. And, shout out to Diego Luna. He does a great job with it. So then we move on to episode 9, which, as I mentioned, I think was my favorite episode because it gave those season 1 vibes. Mon Mothma finally decides it is time to speak up. We have Bail Organa, who unfortunately was recasted. I think they said there was a lot of scheduling conflicts. It's not like the original actor didn't want to do it. He was just in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. He obviously would have come back if he could have, but he didn't. And I think the new actor here does a really good job of having that elegance and refinedness of Bail Organa here, and that kindness to him, because he is looking out for Mon Mothma, and you see his sacrifice as well. Mon is putting her neck out by saying something against the Emperor to the entire Senate floor, but he has to stay in the Imperial Senate, and he has to rub shoulders with these people and play the game right under their noses, which is just as scary and is just as much of a sacrifice. And we ultimately know in the end, it gets him and his entire planet killed. So Mon is preparing her speech. Her assistant Eskrin is helping her debug her office, and she needs to go for a walk, and she runs into Luthen, and Luthen tells her, hey, during your speech tomorrow, Bail Organa's team is compromised. Do not go with them. And also, Eskrin works for me, and he's been working for me for 2 years. And again, Mon Mothma, every time she trusts someone, every time she gets close to someone, there's a betrayal, whether it's people with shadowed intentions or people with completely good intentions. She can't trust anyone, and it's just so brutal to watch my queen go through this once again. But Luthen is telling the truth, as he always is, but it's very hard to swallow, and he's looking out for her. I want one more scene with Mon and Luthen. They have been such a great piece of this Andor galaxy, and I don't know if we're going to get one, because at the end of this arc, Luthen does stay behind on Coruscant, and the hammer has come down. Obviously, the Empire is going to be much more oppressive and more vigilant on Coruscant because of Mon Mothma and what she did. So I don't know if we'll get another scene, but I really want one. What I love about Luthen and his relationship to the rebellion is that he's not tied in with Bail and Dodonna to a higher degree. He's connected. He's like, yeah, I'm not ready for Yavin. I'm not ready to go there yet. But he is a part of it. I love that there's still segmentation between the different factions in the rebellion, and they're still all doing what they need to do to succeed. So like the fact that Luthen is working just as much as Bail is working to get Mon Mothma out of there, there is no coordination, and he can't tell Bail because then it'll be compromised. So then we have the Senate portion of this episode where Mon is about to give her speech, and Cassian is the one that's going to save her and get her out of there instead of Bail's compromised team. Again, Tonian team building a bunch of different tension points. We have Mon giving a speech in front of the entire Imperial Senate, calling out Emperor Palpatine, and then we also have the team that's supposed to get out of there is compromised. Cassian is reluctant, but wants to do this one last thing for Luthen. It's all just really great. Now, we've had a lot of great speeches in Andor. We've had Luthen's speech, we've had Marva's speech, we've had Kino's speech, we've had Nemik's speech, and I was really excited because Mon Mothma was finally going to get her speech. And I really enjoyed this speech. However, and I know you guys are like, wait, he's going to say something bad about this? It's not bad. I just think the intercuts that they did for Mon's speech were less impressive than the ones that they did for Marva's speech at the end of season 1. I appreciate that they wanted to do kind of a inside the building feel where she was coming in clear, and then she was coming in through a monitor, and then in some cases you weren't even hearing the speech because you were in a back room. But I think there was a little bit too much of that, and the speech might have gotten lost in there at some points, especially that point where that guy's trying to break open the door to shut down the Senate chamber, and he has that conversation with those two maintenance workers. I just thought that kind of took us out of the speech, and it was supposed to be a big triumphant moment, which it still was. I think the speech is, again, great, talking about truth, and when we lose truth, that's when evil can take root. That's a message that will always be applicable. It's evergreen. It's timeless. And when Genevieve O'Reilly starts to really get into the speech and talk about the abyss between reality and truth, And when she directly calls out Emperor Palpatine, you're like, let's go. All right, we got to get her out of there. I think Andor overall just had my expectations really high for speeches because they've given so many great ones that this one didn't fully live up to what I wanted, but that doesn't mean it's bad. I think it was great still. I just thought the other ones were handled better in season 1. But as I said, I really liked the use of the eulogy score from season 1 where Marva gave her speech. That's one of my favorites. I love the buildup of that. So then Mon's got to get out of there. She's in high heels too, and she's running through the corridors with Cassian. It's really impressive. Genevieve's killing it here. But again, this was such a cool status quo shakeup with Cassian and Mon on the screen together because we just hadn't seen it before, and it's like, this doesn't look right, but it is right. They are in the same show at the same time. And so Cassian gets her out of there. They're confronted by the double agent. Cassian shoots the agent, and Mon is like horrified. Like, you know, she's been involved in this, but she hasn't really seen the bloodshed herself. She hasn't seen this side of the rebellion, and I love that they emphasize that this is a whole new world for her, even though she's been in the fight in a very different sort of way. And we finally kill her stupid driver. I hated that guy. And she flies away in her taxi car. She gives a little smile as she rides off from the Senate chamber. She's finally free. There is a liberation to it. She's been so weighed down over these past couple years, and to finally be free of all of it, you know, you could sense that she's embracing this next chapter of her life. We don't see anything with her husband. I am curious if in the next arc we see anything with her husband, or her daughter, if she makes contact with them at all, or if she has completely cut herself off. That's something that I wish we saw in the second arc of this season. We didn't really get much of her family life after the first arc. And again, because they've had to condense a lot of these episodes and there's not as much time with some of the characters as I wish there was, I wanted more scenes with her dealing with the aftermath of the wedding and maybe where her home life is at now. And I don't know if we'll get more in the next arc or not, but I am excited to see Mon Mothma in her iconic robes leading the rebellion from Yavin 4. As I brought up in the beginning, they did a very clever thing where they didn't undercut the canon of Star Wars Rebels, where she gives a speech very similar to what she does in this episode. But essentially, she gives the speech in the Senate chamber, they get her out of there, and then she's going to give another speech to the entire galaxy. And there's a line where Draven's like, oh, Cassian, she's going to give another speech. And he's like, I've already heard it. I've already heard her speak. And it was a cool little nod to Star Wars Rebels, even though I don't think Tony cared about giving it a nod. It was nice the way they worked it in. And yeah, so now that piece of Star Wars Rebels, that scene now has that much more weight. And you know that the Ghost crew was involved with getting Mon Mothma after this Senate scene that we saw in Andor. So cool how they've connected all this. And it's pretty funny how Tony Gilroy, someone who admitted that he is not a big Star Wars fan, is respecting canon this much and is working around the canon constraints this much and nailing it. And a lot of other Star Wars creators don't respect canon as much as he does, it seems, which it shouldn't be, because Tony Gilroy is the one that should be like, canon doesn't really matter. I just want to tell my story. But he really respects it, and I love that. I love it so much. So then we end with Cassian being back home with Bix. They've had a lot of great chemistry over this entire season, and she decides to leave, and he wakes up and sees this recording from her. I love the voiceover as he's sprinting through the forest trying to stop her, or at least he thinks he can stop her. And you hear how much it hurts her to have to say these words, but she knows that Cassian will pick her over the rebellion, and she can't allow that to happen. She wants to be brave. I think she wants to fight, but she can't. She can't bring herself to fight in the way Cassian can fight. And this is her way to be brave and stand up to the Empire by giving up something so important to her, because she knows that he is such a huge force for good, as Brasso tells Andor in Season 1 from Marva. When everything aligns for him, he will be unstoppable force for good. So, yeah, Cassian was ready to leave, and now he's forced to, I guess, stay with the rebellion because he has nothing else. And maybe this means Bix gets to survive, but it is really bittersweet because she ends the message, and this almost got me. This one almost got me, where she said, when we've won, we can do everything that we didn't get to, or we should have done. I'll find you. And you know that he doesn't make it. They win in the end, but he isn't there to see it. A common theme of Andor. Fighting for a sunrise that you may never see. And we know Cassian does make that ultimate sacrifice, but even if we don't see Bix in the next arc, or if we do for a little, we can at least watch Rogue One knowing that she's out there, potentially, and when they do win, when the Death Star 2 does come down, that she is smiling and crying, knowing that Cassian gave his life for something that did end up paying off. And that's really beautiful. Where I take issue is that they undercut this beautiful moment by injecting the K2SO waking up scene right after this. You know, Cassian's still like crying and recovering, and I wanted to sit in this moment a bit more, but they're like, we have to get K2 in before the next arc, so here's him waking up, and here's him having a quippy line of dialogue, which would have been great at any other point, but right after this Bix speech, I was like, I didn't need this. I didn't need an Alan Tudyk quippy one-liner. So for me, this sequencing didn't work, and I wish they just let the Bix scene sit a little bit longer, but this probably worked for a lot of other people, and that's totally fine. So, as always, I could talk forever about Andor. There's so much to talk about across these 3 episodes. They're so dense, but overall, I really enjoyed these episodes. They're not without their flaws, but they absolutely deliver on making us feel the weight of the Ghorman Massacre and the huge tonal and status quo switch up at the end of episode 9, where we know that the galaxy is in a very different place than where it started. We have shifted into open rebellion against the Emperor, and that's why it was such a fitting title to have episode 9 titled Welcome to the Rebellion. I am so curious how they wrap this up. We know that it leads directly into the first scene from Rogue One, or at least the first mission in Rogue One, where we see Cassian. But there's a lot of loose ends. There's a lot of characters that we've met throughout Andor that need proper send-offs here. Mon Mothma, this might be the last time we really see her in live action, which is so sad to say because she's become one of my favorite characters because of this show. So where does her story end up? You know, what do we explore next week of her being a commander and a general of the rebellion? Where does Luthen go? He's still on Coruscant. Does he make it out, or does he finally make that ultimate sacrifice? K2 and Cassian are obviously going to be a thing now after a year of being together. Curious to see that relationship a bit more. I want to see more Krennic. I think we'll see Mads Mikkelsen as Galen Erso. I saw him at Star Wars Celebration. He came out and gave an interview, so I expect to see him in the next arc, and I also don't think they would have brought Krennic back just for those, 3 episodes he was in. And where is Deidre? You know, does Deidre leave the Empire? Does she get detained for not following orders? There's so much to cover, but I can't believe that this Andor ride is coming to an end next week. It has been amazing. It's been some of the best Star Wars we've ever gotten, and I hope it sets a new standard for what Star Wars should be from a quality perspective. I know that this is a very high bar, and I know we might not get anything this good for a very long time. So I'm going to savor it. I hope you're going to savor it, and I can't wait to watch Rogue One again after next week's arc. So thank you guys so much for listening. Please leave a comment below on what you thought of this arc. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Would really appreciate it. If you're listening on streaming platforms, please leave a review or hit the notification so you know when I'm dropping new episodes. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, you can follow me at @star_wars_mark of balance. Thank you guys, as always. Stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you. Peace.